and welcome again to the UK edition, and again from Paris. We are the UK edition, but we are on good terms with our neighbours and we do wander about every now and then. And this week the world is in Paris. The who's who of the world engaged in the fight against climate change. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in the lead in that fight, in India's way and on India's terms.
The long-awaited climate summit began in Paris this week with all eyes on India and on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Developed countries led by US President Barack Obama want India to sign up to a global agreement to cut emissions that would limit India's coal options. But Narendra Modi held firm to India's long opposition to such demands. India's position has been that the developed world is responsible for most of the emissions and must therefore pay for transfer of technology, easing of IPR restrictions and create more carbon space for developing countries such as India. He reiterated India's long policy of common but differentiated responsibilities.
Over the next few days, we will decide the fate of this planet. We do so when the consequences of the industrial age powered by fossil fuel are evident, especially on the lives of the poor. The prosperous still have a strong carbon footprint, and the world's billions at the bottom of the development ladder are seeking space to grow. So the choices are not easy, but we have awareness and technology. We need now national will and a genuine global partnership. Democratic India must grow rapidly to meet the aspirations of 1.25 billion people, 300 million of whom are without access to energy. We are determined to do so, guided by our ancient belief that people and planet are inseparable, that human well-being and nature are indivisible. So, we have set ambitious targets. By 2030, we will reduce emissions by 33 to 35% of 2005 levels and produce 40% of our power from non-fossil fuels. We will achieve it by expanding renewable energy, for example, by adding 175 gigawatts of renewable energy generation by 2022. We will enlarge our forest cover to absorb at least 2.5 billion tons worth of carbon dioxide. We are reducing dependence on fossil fuel through levies and reduction in subsidies. Switching sources of fuel where possible and transforming cities and public transportation. We hope advanced nations will assume ambitious targets and pursue them sincerely. It is not just a question of historical responsibility. They also have the most room to make the cuts and make the strongest impact. And climate justice demands that with the little carbon space we still have, developing countries should have enough room to grow. This also means aggressive mitigation action by developed countries before 2020, including ratification of second commitment period of Kyoto Protocol, removing conditions or revisiting targets, the principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities must remain the bedrock of our collective enterprise across all areas.
The message from India came in all sorts of ways, and one spectacular way was the Indian Pavilion at the conference centre, quite unparalleled.
Mr. Narendra Modi spoke at the Indian Pavilion, quite the star of the conference venue. Its colours, its waterfall in words, and its blend of the ancient and the modern drew more visitors than any other pavilion saw.
This then is a spectacular India Pavilion here at Paris. The falling water is telling the story. Read what the water says. It's not every day you can get to do that sort of thing. Walk in, past these displays that tell you the story, that let you pick the story you want to hear. And again, right inside, we look all around and there's a 360 display circling you with a story to tell. Walk in, pick your story. And here, pick the story of the past, pick the story of the future, 2030. You choose. The idea is that India has a rich tradition in environmental concerns and has very firm plans for the future. This tells us the whole story from the past to the future, where you want to know, where you want to go. So much better than hearing a speech. The bright spark from India and for the world came by way of launch of the International Solar Alliance by the Indian Prime Minister.
India demonstrated its commitment to clean energy with the launch of an international solar alliance where French President François Hollande and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon joined Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Many countries are expected to join the alliance.
Declaration on the occasion to launch the International Solar Alliance of countries dedicated to the promotion of solar energy. Recognizing that sustainable development, universal energy access and energy security are critical to the shared prosperity and future of our planet, and acknowledging that clean and renewable energy needs to be made affordable for all, we do hereby declare our intention to support India's proposal to launch an international solar alliance as a common platform for cooperation among solar resource-rich countries lying fully or partially between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. United by a shared vision to bring clean, affordable and renewable energy within the reach of all, we affirm our intention to join the International Solar Alliance as founding members to ensure the promotion of green, clean and sustainable energy and to draw on the beneficence of the sun in this endeavor. We share the collective ambition to undertake innovative and concerted efforts with a view to reducing the cost of finance and cost of technology for immediate deployment of competitive solar generation capacity in all our countries.
I am honored and pleased to join you for the launch of the International Solar Alliance. In September, Prime Minister Modi and more than 130 world leaders met at the United Nations in New York to adopt the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. At the heart of the new agenda are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which aim to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, protect the environment, and promote the life of well-being and dignity for all. But to achieve Sustainable Development Goals, we must address climate change. This is the challenge and the opportunity to be seized here in Paris. We have one critical overarching priority at COP21. Government must adopt a robust universal climate change agreement.
We await the outcomes of the conference, but it became abundantly clear, particularly in the course of a meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Barack Obama, that India will set its own terms, that it will not be dictated to on the pace and on the measures it takes to fight climate change. We'll take a short break now, but we'll be back to face some contentious issues at this climate summit. Welcome back, and let's speak now with some people at the sharp edge of the negotiations and the campaigning.
A giant green balloon created on behalf of Greenpeace did not quite take off in Paris. Wind energy proved too strong, but Greenpeace plans were not deflated, as the UK edition learned.
There's hardly a voice in the world that speaks more forcefully for the green idea than Kumi Naidoo, the executive director of Greenpeace. Kumi, great to talk to you. Your big green idea has got deflated behind us. Not a sign of things to come, is it?
No, that was as per plan. What has not been as per plan is obviously the horrific attacks here in Paris. And of course, we have seen such pain being experienced in India, in Beirut and Bamako last weekend. And it's very important we actually ask ourselves the question, how do we respond to these attacks? Because this was one of the small opportunities we've had, because the French government has closed down all possibilities for citizens to actually express their concern, growing concern, that our political leaders are not acting fast enough on climate. And
so it's had its consequences for your green campaign here in Paris.
Yes, but it has its consequences beyond just for issues of the environment and the urgent issue of climate. It has an issue of what is the quality of democracy that we have. Because the real test of democracy is not whether you hold true to values when everything is well. The real test of democracy, whether you hold true to the values of freedom of assembly, expression, and so on, when in fact you're under threat. And the fact that here in France right now, there are climate activists who have been house arrested in their homes for 2 weeks is a complete overreaction, but also it's saying to the men of terror that you are so strong, we will undermine certain fundamental tenets of democracy, and that's unfortunate.
Well, that's around the talks, but when it does come down to the talks, what is the likely realistic result?
Well, I think realistic, there's various words. People ask me, are you optimistic, are you idealistic, are you realistic? So let me just say first what I'm optimistic about.
On paper,
Yeah.
what would result?
Okay, so right now, we will, I think, get a clear statement that in Paris, the world began the process of burying the fossil fuel industry, right? That it's not that it's going to happen tomorrow, but I think the signal is going to be very clear that we need to get off oil, first we need to get off coal as quick as possible.
That's optimistic.
Right? Oh no, I think, let's be blunt about it. I know that there is cognitive dissonance in the Indian government, for example, about hanging on to coal, but they are today one of about 6 governments around the world who are in a minority who actually think that coal investments are actually appropriate.
But it's not about being 1 in 6. You need to get 280 million people connected. They need to be on the energy map. They're without energy.
Yes.
What are India's options? Surely coal is unavoidable.
Oh, well, I think that is the fallacy that our governments, because if you ask who supports, who is the biggest backers of the current government in India, and you look at who they are coal industry, there's GMOs, nuclear, and so on, right? So let's be clear. India has the ability to be a leader, global leader in solar, right?
It is on its way.
It's on its way, and why should they continue to invest in an industry that hurts the people that live around the coal plants in terms of health and so on, which has been proven beyond doubt? Why should they be investing in an industry that will end up in what many investment analysts are saying will be stranded carbon assets?
Because solar by itself is not enough and
Who says?
not quick enough.
Who says?
It will not be quick enough, surely.
Surely, if we continue to, I can quote you study after study, not Greenpeace studies, that shows that it's within our capability in 35 years to actually make the transition to clean, renewable energy-based provision as 100%. Now you're seeing even dominant governments are actually agreeing that we can decarbonize by 2050 if there is political will.
But Kumi, the government has studied this. It is their determination that for the next generation, it will need coal. If you have almost 300 million people without energy, that's close to the entire population of the US. You can't think of the US today as a place without energy, without power. So why think of India? And if coal is not the cleanest, it's not the prettiest, but if it is unavoidable in the immediate and for the generation and for its needs now, is it at all wise to deny power to people?
Absolutely not. And you know, let me just say that I'm very intrigued at how many people today have become so concerned about the poor and their energy needs, when people like myself, for decades and decades, as you know, have been fighting for energy access and poverty. Suddenly, everybody's very concerned about the poor. Let me be blunt about it. What is being said is not backed up by reality. What is being said is actually what you're seeing is, in fact, all over the world we have this problem. Our governments have been captured by very powerful corporate interests. If you take the United States, just to put a distance from India, today you can describe the United States as the best democracy money can buy. And if you unpack which money buys that influence, it's oil, coal, gas, nuclear, military, and so on. So, for example, to even use the term clean coal is a complete fallacy. You can talk about maybe less harmful or less dirty coal. When a country like India is facing massive climate vulnerability and threat, when a country like India knows, right, that it has huge potential in solar and can be and that's only one potential it has. It has biomass, it has wind, it has wave, it has geothermal, and so on. Right?
Wind, of course, can be uncertain, as we've seen.
Of course, wind can be uncertain, sun can be uncertain, but that uncertainty is only an issue because of battery storage. Today, we know storage facilities are on the table. Yes, they might be too expensive right now, but on the expense side, let's be blunt about it. It is not apples and oranges. Globally, we're still having taxpayer money to the tune of close to $1 trillion a year going to oil, coal, and gas companies. If you look at the subsidies given to wind, solar, and so on, it's a minuscule fraction, right? And that's not counting the accumulated amount of taxpayer money that has gone. So right now, I refuse to accept that a country like India, that has such talented people, such technological innovation, such visionary civil society activists, cannot actually chart its future in a direction where it recognizes that the successful countries of the future will not be those that win the arms race in space race. The successful countries will be those that win the green technology race now. And the longer India drags its feet, continues to dabble with coal plants. Like, for example, one of the biggest coal plants in India is not going to happen. Coal project is not going to happen. The Adani Essar mine in Australia, for example, all the financiers are pulled up.
But speaking India, finally, Kumi, the perception in India, and it seems to be a reasonable perception, that a lot of the West is now lecturing India on the right thing to do after having developed on the back of coal, and lecturing India on what to do without providing the money and the funds for it.
Yes.
So I mean, surely India does not need just advice, being told what to do. It needs financial support for this.
Absolutely. And that is why one of the core demands of Greenpeace for more than a decade now has been that we have to recognize that developed countries carry the huge carbon debt, or climate debt if you want, when we are saying that in the Green Climate Fund there needs to be no less than $100 billion a year, which actually is a fraction of the amount that is spent on fossil fuel subsidies now. we are saying that it's not charity that developing countries are asking for. We are saying to developed countries, you need to pay your debt. And so I think a complete deal breaker here for anything sensible to come out, if there isn't a clear indication, which Greenpeace will support and is pushing for, that the developed countries of the world need to show a clear path of how resources are going to be made available to help poor countries, not to follow the same dirty energy pathway they follow to build their economies, and that requires significant support. And let's be blunt about it, India is not going to be the only country that's going to benefit from that fund. There are many more smaller, more vulnerable countries also need to be supported, and we would like to see enough resources for that to be able to happen.
Thank you very much, Kumi, for talking to us, and see you in the near green future.
Thank you.
That's it for now, but stay clean, stay green, and watch the calories at those Christmas parties. See you next week.